Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. On behalf of IACAPAP, welcome to this special webinar. Our special interest group webinar today will be on International Pediatric Psychopharmacology. So my name is Dr. Ammar Al-Banna. I'm the Vice President of IACAPAP and the Director of Al-Amal Psychiatric Hospital under Emirates Health Services in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. Our main speaker for today will be Dr. Boris Lorberg. Dr. Lorberg is a board-certified adult, child and adolescent psychiatrist and associate professor of psychiatry at UMass Chan Medical School. He is the medical director of the Community Behavioral Health Center in Lawrence, Massachusetts, overseeing integrated mental health care services for adults, youth, and families. Born in Kiev, Ukraine, he trained at Stony Brook University, completed psychiatry residency at Yale, and completed his child and adolescent psychiatry training at Harvard. He co-chairs the ACAP Committee on Psychopharmacology and Neurotherapeutics and serves as a section editor for the Psychopharmacology Corner of ACAP News. Dr. Lorberg is recognized for his clinical leadership, academic contributions, and international collaborations, including initiatives supporting child mental health in Ukraine. A warm welcome to Dr. Boris Lorberg. We also have with us today a special guest speaker, Professor Samuele Cortese. Dr. Cortese is an NIHR research professor and professor of child and adolescent psychiatry at the University of Southampton and an honorary consultant with the Hampshire and Isle of Wight NHS. He's also an adjunct professor at New York University. He is considered a leading global expert on neurodevelopmental disorders and has authored over 450 papers and secured more than £23 million in funding. Since 2022, he has ranked among the top 1% of scientists worldwide and also ranked as the #1 global scientist with regards to expertise in ADHD. His work appears in renowned journals, and he's also the editor of Rutter's Textbook of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. So a very warm welcome also to Professor Samuele Cortese to our webinar today. And without further ado, at this point, I will pass the mic to Dr. Boris Lorberg to kick the presentation. And during the presentation, please feel free to post your questions in the questions and answer section, and we'll have a chance to go over the question at the end of the webinar today. So the mic is yours, Dr. Boris.
Okay, sorry for a moment's delay. Thank you so much for your kind introduction, Dr. Al-Banna. It's my pleasure to meet here with everybody. Okay. All right, so welcome everyone. So across all regions, clinicians face gaps between evidence and practice, and this special interest group aims to bridge that gap through shared tools and collaboration. So today is the first special interest group webinar for the International Pediatric Psychopharmacology. Sorry, that skipped forward. Okay, and I'll be presenting to you with our special guest, Dr. Samuele Cortese, as Dr. Ammar had shared. So in terms of conflict of interest disclosures, I have royalties from Springer Publishing for a book called Pediatric Psychopharmacology Evidence, a Clinician's Guide. And this presentation will also include discussion of off-label medication use. Learning objectives, by the end of this presentation, we hope that you'll be able to introduce the origin and current global composition of the special interest group in international pediatric psychopharmacology, be able to describe key needs of the special interest group members and people who would like to join, be able to review examples of practical resources that would be helpful to share and use, and to also outline future directions of for special interest group development. So the story of this special interest group is remarkable, and I think is a good illustration. So it started with a May 2024 conversation, informal lunch conversation among several IACAPAP members during the Congress in Rio de Janeiro. And we all agreed that IACAPAP members needed more opportunities for networking and collaboration. And just out of that one lunch conversation, this whole initiative was born. And to me, this is an illustration of how when people come together and share ideas and interest, real tangible results happen. So the following July of 2024, IACAPAP Bureau invited proposal for establishment of any special interest groups. And so in March of this year, 2025, IACAPAP leadership approved establishment of this International Pediatric Psychopharmacology special interest group. And in June, there was a publication in the bulletin about this SIG. And between June and October of this year, over 50 psychiatrists have completed a needs assessment survey and joined this group. And they represent all 6 continents and over 30 countries. And this is just in the first several months of the group being established. So it's now November, and we are having our first webinar. And we have submitted a proposal for a symposium for the 2026 Congress in Hamburg. And hopefully we will be able to do more work there as well. So Sue, if you don't mind, please put the survey question number 1 on. So this is a real-time poll on who the participants of this webinar are. So please pick your group, and if it's other, then we are going to have another slide where you'll be able to type in and describe other more. And by the way, thank you so much to Sue Wang. She is the force behind IACAPAP and behind this webinar. And she does amazing work. And so right now, she's in charge of all the technical support. So Sue, when you feel like you've had enough responses, maybe advance to the second part of this slide of this poll, so we can give people a chance to type in other description. And one of the things that I really like about IACAPAP and that really draws me to this organization is that it's a multidisciplinary organization. It doesn't just focus on the needs and interests of child psychiatrists. It also engages and involves all allied professionals. All right, so it looks like 80% of the people who are joining now are child and adolescent psychiatrists, 5% are other physician allied professional, 3% are non-physician allied professional, there are 5% trainees, and there is one actually person who is a representative of parents and families, which is wonderful. And there's also one person who is a representative of governmental or non-governmental organizations, which is also really critical as well. And then we have 5% who did not answer this question. So let's see. Is there more information, Sue? It sounds like maybe not. So we can advance to the next slide. All right. Okay, so this is a website, IACAPAP website information. So just to summarize, the mission of this special interest group is to foster educational collaboration among both journalists and psychiatrists and allied mental health professionals to improve global child and adolescent mental health care. Specific objectives include developing the group for all IACAPAP members who would like to share resources and learn together, to have a global forum to discuss resources, interests, and challenges in a bidirectional sharing manner, and to also encourage academic collaborations and publications among journalists and psychiatrists and allied professions, so that we can all both support each other and advance the interests and capacity of the global child mental health, adolescent mental health. So in the last couple of months, those who joined, and that's over 50 people, represent 6 continents. So Europe is most represented. We have 10 countries represented from Europe. Asia has 8 countries. North America and South America each have 3. Africa right now only has 2 countries represented, and Oceania has 1. And this is, to me, this is also an example of how if you only have one person who is, doing the work, the outcome may not always be, optimal. So, for example, I wanted to have this location of the group members to be shown on a map, but it turned out that it kind of exceeded my technical capacity. I'm sure that of the 100 people who are joined today, I'm sure there are several people who would know how to do that, but because I have not been connected to those people, we are just looking at the coordinates and there's no actual map. So to me, this is it shows the potential of us working together. Just to clarify, the blue color of the dots is the current location of the participant, the special interest group member, and the red color of the dot is the original location. So there are many people who were born and educated in one location, and then they are currently practicing living in another one. So that's what you see with the blue and the red dots. So in terms of the stakeholders and constituencies of our special interest group, I feel it's important to make sure that we are clear that we are representing at least 4 different stakeholder groups. So of course, there are child nurses and psychiatrists, but there are not enough of those. Allied professions are a critical stakeholder group, and they can function as a force multiplier for everybody. And then we couldn't do this work and wouldn't be successful or effective if we didn't include representatives of the parents and families, as well as representatives of governmental and non-governmental organizations. So these are critical for both bottom-up changes and top-down changes. And this reminds me of the recent webinar that Dr. Wakar Azim had about a week ago on autism, and the story he shared there, where it was the parents and family members who met with the members of the government of Qatar, who really made a difference in terms of moving the government and the capacity forward to create much more inclusive and much more supported services for children and families with autism. So, Sue, if you don't mind, if you could pull up the survey question number 2, and this is a question about your greatest professional need from your perspective that this special interest group may be able to address for the participants of this webinar. And as you see, all of these areas are critically important and interrelated. But as we are choosing our direction and next steps, it does help to clarify what do interest group members and people who would like to support this interest group feel is most important. All right, so we've got 43% of the people present, so 118 people, see access to up-to-date evidence and guidelines and clinical consultations as the #1 priority, 43%. So then next one down is 20%, networking, collaboration, clinical educational research and advocacy arenas. Next one is 10%, supporting development and updates of national medication guidelines and protocols. And then close after 9% is education of children, families, and the public about pediatric psychopharm. Then 8% is support capacity building and training of other providers and allied professions. And 7% access to clinical tools such as validated diagnosis and outcome instruments. And we only had 2% of people who did not respond. So this is a really helpful feedback. And let's see what the special interest group members said to these questions. So we did part of the application to become a member of the special interest group is to answer several questions, including a needs assessment. And these questions can be divided into what the members need from others and what the members want to give to others. So the two questions that we included were, one, what topic areas could benefit from the special interest group support, consultation, or webinar? So what specific areas would the SIG members see as needing attention? And the other question is what projects of the special interest group the member is willing to volunteer their time to? So what is it they want to contribute? And then there were also informal email exchanges. I tried to reach out to as many members as I could, asking, again, what are the greatest needs that would benefit from this work? So the responses we got from over 50 members of the interest group over the last couple of months showed six clear global themes. So #1 is the theme of evidence to practice gap. So there's a mismatch between the evidence and the clinical practice, both globally and regionally. #2 was medication availability barriers. So challenges with regulations, costs, and supply chains that lead to decreased access to medications. There was also a theme of medication both underused in some cases and overused in other cases, such as, for example, stimulant medication for ADHD treatment not being widely available. Of course, there is a theme of workforce shortages, as everybody is aware. And then there were two other themes. One, importance of cultural and systemic influences on access to mental health care, including cultural attitudes towards medications, stigma of mental illness, and also various healthcare system pressures and complexities. And lastly, a theme emerged that there is a strong interest in collaboration and working on these issues together as a community. Some specific evidence practice gap examples are that most children with ADHD never see a doctor in the world. There are many countries where guanfacine, for example, was never approved for treatment of ADHD and is not readily available, even though it's not even a stimulant. There are some countries in the world where stimulant medications are effectively banned, whether that's formal or informal. And there are some countries where antipsychotics may be used as first-line treatment for child, including preschooler disruptive behavior, which is definitely not consistent with the evidence and best practices. So the second theme was medication access barriers. And we identified 5 major barriers to medication access. And you wouldn't be surprised that they include regulatory restrictions, challenges with costs, bureaucratic prescribing complexities and barriers, decreased interest of pharmaceutical industry in small market that often pediatric psychopharmacology represents, and also significant concerns about stigma and cultural attitudes towards medications. So the third theme that we discovered is the medications being underused in some cases, overused in other cases. And the contributing factors that became clear include both inadequate access to first-line agents, but also limited supervision structures, lack of clear and unified guidelines, and also uneven access to valid assessment tools that leads to inadequate assessment and diagnosis, which of course then leads to less than optimal treatment. So collaborative solutions that came up in these email conversations included a resource hub on advocacy and other clinical resources, ECHO mentorship models. And if you're not familiar with Project ECHO, it is something to learn about. And we'll hopefully talk more about it during the symposium in Hamburg. Also, evidence sharing and regional tailoring of clinical guidelines, and also diagnostic and outcome tool sharing. So the third theme was workforce gaps and collaboration opportunities. And again, the challenges are pretty consistent. Shortage of child psychiatrists, limited supervision, lack of guidelines, and solutions appear to also be fairly consistent. Ability to build capacity via international consultations, such as, for example, using an ECHO model, but there are other models one can use. Algorithm adaptation projects where the algorithm that may work for one country may not work for another. So it's important to take the evidence that we have and then adapt it to the regional and cultural context. And also increasing access to resources by developing open access resource hubs. So overall, in terms of the answer to the question of what do members want to work on, what are they willing to volunteer their time to, and time is the most precious commodity that we have. And so of almost 50 responses that we got, it became clear that the main goal is to share and develop resources. There were 3 potential modes that would be used all at the same time. One is to have a web-based open access resource hub. Another one is to conduct webinars and training using technology and working together on both low and middle income country focused challenges, special topics, making sure we cover early career needs as well. And then the third one is to continue to develop mentorship and peer support community. So in terms of the force multipliers for all of these particular modes, research projects, advocacy work, and technology and use of AI came up as very helpful, potentially effective ways to increase the impact of this work. So specific ideas for special interest group work groups so far include a couple of ideas. So number one is sharing and building the evidence. So for example, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second, so being able to discuss evidence in a consistent way using a grade approach, and also being able to actually have an interactive real-time evidence database, such as the one that Dr. Samuele Cortese's team has developed for ADHD. The second area for a work group has to do with validated instruments, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And the example for that is ICHAM, and that is an effort that a child psychiatrist from Australia, Dr. David Cockhill, is leading and helping us in this group as well. And then the third area is sharing of patient education materials and perhaps translating them into other languages if they're useful, and I'll talk about that. I had mentioned Project ECHO, so that's more to talk about. And then I'm sure there are other ideas for potential special interest work groups, including ways to address stigma towards psychiatric medications, ways to tackle side effects of obesity and sexual dysfunction, and I'm sure there are others as well. So focusing on the developing common language for evidence, GRADE framework is one way to do that. And this is, for those of you who are not aware of it, it was created in early 2000s. And since then, it's been adopted by both World Health Organization, the up-to-date guidelines, Cochrane database, and many other leading evidence assessment organizations. And GRADE stands for Grading of Recommendations, Assessment, Development, and Evaluation. And it has two components. One is it has a consistent and transparent approach to determining quality of the evidence. And it's important to remember that this is determined per outcome. So it's not general, for a diagnosis. It's really for a specific outcome. And the more specific, the more helpful this assessment is. And the quality is categorized into high, moderate, low, or very low, A, B, C, or D. And then the second component of GRADE is strength of recommendation per that particular outcome. And the options are either strong recommendation or conditional recommendation, and it can be either for an intervention or against an intervention. So as you see here, the result of this GRADE framework is that when we are speaking to a particular patient or parent, we can say that based on the evidence that's available, this particular intervention is either very unlikely, that we have confidence that ranges from high confidence that the expected and estimated effect reflects accurate picture. So, for example, that if we are using a medication, that it will likely to improve the symptoms or not cause side effects. So the range of the confidence is from high to very low, and the strength of recommendation, again, so if it's a strong recommendation, it applies to most patients without reservation. If it's a conditional recommendation, then alternatives may be better for some patients. So in terms of the clinical impact, there is, as you can see here, there's a range between 1A, so strong recommendation with high quality evidence, where benefits clearly outweigh risks of a particular intervention, and this recommendation applies to most patients, to the 2 or conditional weak recommendation, D, very low quality of evidence, where the recommendation is based on highly uncertain evidence and where individualized decision is needed. So this is just a useful diagram of how this GRADE framework is applied normally. So it was developed for specifically guideline developments, but it can also be useful in other situations as well. So first, there needs to be a clinical question, which is usually about an intervention, sometimes about an assessment tool. And one has to select a specific outcome. Like, for example, decrease in hyperactivity is one outcome. Then usually there needs to be a systematic review of the evidence. The evidence profile gets built, and then there's a guideline panel that gets assembled, usually expert panel, and the panel determines the quality of the evidence for that particular outcome, from high to very low. And there are specific methodological questions that one needs to answer in order to determine the quality of the evidence. And then there's a discussion, making sure that the panel agrees on this particular rating of the quality. And then there is a recommendation either for or against an intervention. And the recommendation is based on not just certainty of the evidence, which is the first part of the approach, but also recommendations are based on balancing benefits versus risks for the patient. Importantly, it's also based on patient values and preferences. It also is based on resource use or cost of a particular intervention, feasibility of implementing it, acceptability of the intervention to patients, and equity or access. So as you can see, there are multiple other priorities that go into deciding whether or not an intervention gets strong recommendation or conditional recommendation, for or against. So as you might imagine, the actual grades can be fairly variable depending on what priorities one chooses to use. So this is an example of a table that we put together for the October American Academy of Child Nurse and Psychiatry annual conference in Chicago last month, where for the first time ACAP discussed grade as a framework that's useful. And so, for example, if you look here on the first row, so for ADHD, and here, as you can see, the outcome is not very specific. ADHD is general, diagnosis, but this is a way to demonstrate how to think about this particular approach. So if you were to think about ADHD as a general diagnosis, the highest quality of evidence and the strongest recommendation, so 1A, is for monotherapy with either methylphenidate or mixed amphetamine salt agents. Then 1B, so still strong recommendation, but moderate quality of evidence, is for augmentation using either guanfacine or clonidine extended release formulations. And then 2A, which is conditional recommendation for use based on high quality, is to use monotherapy with either guanfacine extended release or clonidine extended release, or also atomoxetine modafinil. And then lower quality of evidence is 2B for monotherapy with either immediate release guanfacine or clonidine, bupropion, or augmentation with atomoxetine. So as you can see, this is a way to synthesize the evidence and both how confident we are that in the estimate of effect of the evidence behind use of this medication or this intervention, and also how this particular intervention applies to general population, whether it applies to most patients or maybe only to some. So why is grade helpful and important? It has 4 critical benefits for clinical practice. One, it uses specific explicit criteria for how we are assessing the evidence. The result of the assessment may be different depending on what criteria and how we use these criteria. But it's important that these criteria are always transparent and explicit. It also allows for flexibility where, based on the same evidence, different clinicians in different regions may choose different recommendations, based on both risk-benefit assessment, but also patient values and costs and equity. It also supports shared decision-making, where the meaning of evidence is being communicated with patients and families in a way that they understand. And it also helps us manage uncertainty, because our evidence is far from sufficient. And so there's a lot of uncertainty when we make medication decisions. I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Samuele Cortese to talk about another example of how we can think about evidence and how we can share resources to improve the quality of the care of children and adolescents we work with.
Thank you very much, Boris, and thanks a lot for having me here. I'm going to share the slides from my side, so it will be easier to move, I guess. Right, perfect. Here you go. Right. So what I would like to do is to present an initiative which I think it fits very well with the purpose of the special interest group. And basically, it is based on a novel methodological framework which aims to do basically two things. First, to provide the most comprehensive synthesis of the evidence on treatments in child-adolescent psychiatry. And second, and importantly, to disseminate this evidence via a platform which is freely available, it is continuously updated, and hopefully user-friendly. So it is a resource which is addressed to clinicians, but also patients and families and stakeholders, guidelines developers. So we hope that this will facilitate the implementation of evidence-based practice and support shared decision-making. So it is based on the strongest and highest level of evidence. And of course, when it comes to evidence, everybody talks about meta-analysis. I'm sure everybody is familiar with this. Now, the problem is that meta-analysis, as with any other study, can be good or not. So actually, if you look at this publication from an eminent colleague in the field, as you can see here, he did an assessment of all the meta-analysis in a specific area of medicine, and it turns out that only 3% of them are of good quality and clinically helpful. The rest is either flawed or redundant or unpublished or misleading. So we have a problem here in terms of selecting good meta-analysis. Another problem with meta-analysis, when we want them to inform clinical practice, is that oftentimes they may be conflicting. So you may have two meta-analyses on the same topic, on the same type of participants, on the same intervention. You see here, for instance, these are two medications in rheumatology. So if you look at the first meta-analysis here, it looks like the first medication is better than the second. But if you look at the second and another meta-analysis, these are all meta-analyses done on these two medications, this meta-analysis tells you the opposite of that. So we have really a problem in synthesizing the evidence from this meta-analysis. The second problem is how we disseminate, we implement the information from meta-analysis, from scientific rigorous evidence in real-world practice. This was a study where professionals in primary care were asked, why do you look at, what kind of information do you look at when you search in your clinical practice? Most of the need was around treatment, not surprisingly. The disappointing part was that when they were asked, what kind of resource do you search to get information to support your decision-making? And most of them, they didn't say, PubMed, a rigorous website reporting scientific studies. Most of them, they said Google, which is the same thing that, my neighbor here could do, who is not a professional in mental health. So there is really a need to make sure that professionals use information, rigorous information, but these need to be practical, friendly, because there is not time for many professionals to read many papers. So to address this issue, we created a new methodological framework, which we call UREACH, alongside two excellent colleagues you see here. So UREACH stands for U Umbrella Review. So Umbrella Review is a synthesis of meta-analysis. Importantly, when we do this synthesis across all meta-analysis, let's say meta-analysis, let's say maybe on ADHD medication for specific outcome, another meta-analysis for ADHD medication on other outcomes, another meta-analysis maybe on other types of intervention, and so on and so forth. So we pull all together, but we do an evaluation. We select only the best in terms of quality meta-analysis. This can be done with tools like the Hamster. And then importantly, we realized that many meta-analyses published had many mistakes, so we rerun the meta-analysis and we provide the quality of the evidence using the GREAT framework modified for meta-analysis, which Boris mentioned. In final step, the CH is communication hub, so we create a platform which is freely available. An example of this is a recent work we did for ADHD. We rerun more than 200 meta-analyses encompassing 30 different types of intervention for 24 outcomes. The paper actually will be published just next week in an important journal, so hopefully you will see it. It will be freely available, open access. So you see here we have all the intervention, and when there is a green dot, it means the intervention works. When it is red, it doesn't work. This is in preschooler, school age, and adults. And here are the different outcomes. And we translated this in freely available platform. This is a beta version. We are revising this following the feedback from clinicians and people with lived experience. But basically, the idea is that when you land in the platform, you select the type of outcome you want and the time point, the age range, and then the graph appears with all the information, which takes a couple of minutes. And this will avoid you to read tons and tons of meta-analysis and scientific papers. And it will be continuously updated and, as I say, freely available. We don't want to make any profit on this. We want this to be a service which is available for the scientific community and clinical community. We are doing other meta-analysis similar on autism, for instance, bipolar disorder. We have this under review, so hopefully we will have this soon. I wanted just to conclude that these meta-analyses are based on randomized control trials. Randomized control trials are very good to establish to assess medications and treatments, but they have limitation. In this study here we published this year, we found that, for instance, if we looked at the population in Sweden, because they have very good registries there, 70% of adults with ADHD will not be eligible to enter in trials, because trials have a clear and stringent inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria. And likewise, in this other publication, we found that there is an underrepresentation of a certain race and ethnicity in trials. So trials and meta-analysis of trials and umbrella review of meta-analysis are very important because it's rigorous evidence, but they are not representative of the general population you see in your clinic. So we need to complement this information with studies which are called observational studies, electronic health record. To do so, we need to have good electronic health records. So as a clinician, I think it's important that we use evidence-based measurement care, which introduce the next topic of the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Cortese. That was a really quick and really helpful introduction to your tool, and hopefully participants will be able to find it online and experiment and see how useful it is. I personally feel like it's very useful. It gives you a way to assess both the quality of evidence and the efficacy of evidence, and also the degree of side effect burden for different medications in a very systematic and efficient manner. So the second area of opportunity is to talk about the importance of both diagnostic assessment and also assessment of outcomes when we conduct treatment. So one example is an international consortium for health outcomes measurement. And Dr. David Coghill from Australia is one of the people leading that effort in child psychiatry. And it's focused on advancing value-based healthcare by defining patient-centered outcome measures and by also doing research in this area as well. So one example is a 2022 and 2024 consortium consensus on neurodevelopmental disorders outcomes and autism spectrum disorders outcomes. And earlier, and so as an example, for ADHD, there is a publicly available measure called SNAP-4 that has translations, good reliability, consistency, and sensitivity to change, which is one of the major requirements for a treatment outcome measure performance. So another consensus 2020 was on standard set of outcomes for pediatric anxiety, depression, OCD, and PTSD. And here's an example of that. So, for example, RCADS 25 is a freely, openly available measure that's also validated, translated, reliable, valid. And I think there is an ongoing work on developing our understanding of whether it's sensitive to change, which of course is critical. So a third area that we mentioned is patient education materials. And so one example is American Academy of Adolescent Child Psychiatry, ACAP website has freely available parent medication guides, facts for families guides, youth resources, and other resource centers. So this is an example of a parent medication guide menu available. So currently these are available in English. As you can see, they're available for ADHD, for ADHD with autism, for anxiety disorders, for autism, for bipolar disorder, even for brain stimulation, which is one of the more recent guides, depression, impairing emotional outbursts, and sleep disorders. And these guides are being developed by the Psychopharmacology and Neurotherapeutics Committee at ACAP in an ongoing manner, about 2 to 3 per year. We also have been able to translate them into Spanish last year. And one of the reasons I wanted to mention these here is because if there's anybody interested in translating them into any other language, we would be happy to collaborate with you and support you there. And these are publicly available resources that currently live on the ACAP website, but they can be available anywhere else. So if anybody's interested, please reach out. So overall, there are 4 ways to get involved. You can join or establish a working group within this specialist group on international pediatric psychopharmacology. You can participate or organize webinars or maybe ECHO-style learning communities. You can also submit clinical cases for consultations. And we hope that this will also be an opportunity for people to come together and do research in multi-country manner on important topics in pediatric psychopharmacology. So the takeaways are there are clear needs in terms of evidence to practice gaps, medication access barriers, workforce shortages, and cultural factors that all create significant challenges to child mental health treatment. One way to approach these barriers is to use GRADE and learn more about that. We do think that collaboration is going to make a huge difference. And so this special interest group offers to bring together diverse stakeholders to share resources and to discuss challenges. And you have a role to play, whether you're a clinician, a researcher, educator, parent advocate, policy leader, you can make a difference. So the next steps are to complete a survey on the IACAPAP website. If you're interested in joining this special interest group, join the group and then collaborate and contribute. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your commitment to improving child and adolescent mental health globally. And we'll have a couple of minutes left for any questions that you might have. And we're also going to make these slides available as a PDF shortly after the webinar.
So thank you very much, Dr. Lorberg, for your excellent presentation, and special thanks to Dr. Cortese also for the excellent input. I have a few, remarks on the excellent presentations, but I would rather jump to the questions because we have very limited time and there are quite a few questions. Maybe if I ask both of you, Dr. Boris and Dr. Cortese, for a short answer, if possible, so we can accommodate as much as possible. So one question is basically with regards to autism. So why it's phrased this way: why few children with autism who strongly require medications experience severe side effects of antipsychotic medications, even at extremely low dosages? So in other words, are there different patterns of metabolism among this population? So I'll open it to any of you to answer this question.
Thank you for the question. So, as a clinician, I definitely would agree that children and adults with autism do tend to tolerate medications less well and have a less of a response. I don't think we know exactly why. That's why we need more research. And I don't think I unfortunately can offer any more than that.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Dr. Lorberg.
Certainly neurobiological hypothesis, but also, we know nocebo effect, all these factors are important. They have not been studied in different diverse populations, so we need more research.
And I share the same clinical experience, so it'd be very good to have more data on this. So there's a question around this special interest group. Sorry, just heading to the question. There's an issue with lack of evidence for comorbidities, which account for majority, according to the question, of routine clinical practice. I was wondering if there are any initiatives within this group that can address this challenge in terms of the role of comorbidities.
I mean, my hope is that this group will provide the opportunities for collaboration. We don't have any funding currently, but I think with all the interest and the talents of the people who have joined today and who might join in the future, I'm sure we can make a difference. Dr. Cortese, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is an important question. It is true that we don't have a lot of evidence for the simple reason that, for instance, when we do trials, we tend to exclude those with comorbidities. So the people we see in the trial are not like the ones we see in real world, which are the most difficult. And if we base guidelines on trials, guidelines are not informative for people who need them. So one way to go around with this is something my team is doing, that we are trying to acquire the data from the individual participants that were included in trials, because some of them they have some comorbidities. So, and then we pull them all together. But basically, to address this, we need to change the way we do research. We need to be more, research need to be more based on the real world.
So thank you very much. I think you spoke to this point, Dr. Cortese, in your presentation. So I've got a note to wrap up the question, the session very quickly. So maybe I'll take a comment and a final question, and then we'll end the presentation. So there's a recommendation from one of the attendees in terms of including the role of pharmaceutical company, funding, as this will dramatically help with the transparency, etc. So this was one recommendation in the comment. And there's a question with regards to whether the special interest group will take into consideration for medications specific age groups, such as intellectual disability, autism, males, females, etc. So we'll end with this question.
Dr. Cortese, would you like to give it a try? You're muted.
Yeah, I do agree that this is an important point. And I think what, for instance, in the platform we are developing, we did is to provide clear statement that this was not funded by industry. But, you know, the industry is very important to support the development of research. So we need to find a way to collaborate in a way that is a win-win. There is always the blame that, you know, this research is dirty because it is funded by industry. But, you know, we need to make clear that without the funding of industry, we cannot advance. So there need to be partnership between industry, university, research institutes, which are different from the individual conflict of interest at the personal level. This is completely different.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cortese. With this, we would like to thank again both of you for the excellent presentation. It was indeed well attended and very engaging session. So thanks to both of you for the wonderful presentation. It will be available later on as a recorded session. This is also an opportunity to make an announcement about special interest groups. So this is an example of a special interest group, international pediatric psychopharmacology. There is a special interest group in coercive control and in patient, child, and adolescent psychiatry under the umbrella of IACAPAP. So if you'd like to know more about creating special interest groups, please use this QR code. And finally, it is my pleasure again on behalf of IACAPAP board and IACAPAP to invite you all to attend the 27th World Congress of IACAPAP that will be held from the 1st to the 4th of July in Hamburg, Germany. Beautiful city, beautiful Congress, I'm sure. And I look forward to seeing all of you there and wish you a very nice day. Thank you very much.